Okay, so welcome to week one. Hopefully you have just watched the overview agenda, the Welcome to Art 387 video, and you'll see that each week is broken down. So each week, there's also a link to discussion boards right here at the bottom if you just want a quick link to that. So I would like you to click on week one, what is art, what is visual culture? And it's going to give you an agenda. Now I know that your version of Blackboard has everything listed here and then just has one item. I don't know why they don't do this for students, but mine has everything listed right here in order. So I'm just going to do it this way so that I can go through these a little more quickly. Just know that you have to click on each item in order to view it if you're not familiar, excuse me, with how Blackboard works. So we have an agenda every week. This is where I will give all the due dates, everything that's going on this week. And it's important that you watch these videos because sometimes I give little extra hints or information that might be important or necessary for the week. I can always tell when students don't watch the agenda videos and then they send me an email asking me about something that I went over in detail in the video, and I always just ask them, did you watch the video? Because it could have saved you a little bit of a headache there if you would have just watched it. I try to keep them about 10 minutes in length. Sometimes they'll be a little shorter, sometimes they might be a little longer. Okay, so everything, as you know, is due day 7 at midnight, and that's January 15th. So that's this coming Sunday is when your work is due. We have a lot of lecture material this week and not a lot of work due this week. But that doesn't mean that you can just skip out on this lecture material because this week we're really giving you a background vocabulary in this whole language that is art and visual culture. So it's going to seem like a lot, and that's okay. This is all information that you can refer back to as well throughout the session. So you're reading this week. You're going to be reading in the Looking at Art, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. This text has lots of images and big font, so it's a quick read. You're reading about the appeal of art and the aims of art. And then in your visual culture text, I want you to read the intro in Chapter 1. So again, we're diving right in this week. We've got 8 weeks, and we're not going to slow down. So I'll usually give some little notes in this section for the visual culture text because it's a little more in-depth and complicated. So I like to give you notes. I would just read through these before you do that reading so that you know what I want you to look for. So we're going to look at what is a visual text. Excuse my phone. The concept that visual texts are read with the same rigor as written text, right? That we have to learn how to read this language. And we need to learn how to read and write visually. We want to be visually literate. Pictures can take over where words are not enough, like the proof through pictures, or that term, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? If we can't read it, we are at the mercy of those who create it. If we don't understand the images, then they get to dictate meaning, right? We don't get to ask questions if we don't understand. Visual literacy is an active pursuit. This is something that you have to continue working on. You never will just learn the language and then be fine because as we know, visual culture and art is always changing and evolving, especially in this day and age when technology happens so rapidly and changes so rapidly. And we need to ask ourselves, should we be reading these differently? Do we need to change our perspective? The printed word is a relatively new phenomenon in the span of human history, if we think about it, and images have been around since the beginning. Okay, in Chapter 1, we really want to look at what is content, and it's going to talk about looking at a portrait versus landscape versus religious art and how sometimes we have to change our perspective a little bit depending on the content of the work. Always look for what is not shown as well as what is shown. I've given you a YouTube clip about the Arnolfini wedding portrait that this chapter talks about. What we really want to focus on in this chapter is Erwin Panofsky because we're going to be using his theories of iconology when we do our theory application paper in a few weeks. So we have the primary or natural level, the secondary or conventional, and the third or intrinsic. Really focus on this section. It begins on page 24. And then I've given you a little lecture where I've dug into Panofsky in more detail and walked through his 3 levels looking at Edgar Degas' ballet class from 1881. So I'm giving you an example of how we can use Panofsky and how you're really going to be using Panofsky when you do your theory application paper. I also have this lecture called What is Art? And it's from the Floating University. It's a really excellent lecture about aesthetics, painting, architecture, all that fun stuff. And it really is going to get you just thinking about this whole idea of what art is. Now, I have the video and I also have a PDF transcript of this lecture. So whether you're a read-write learner and you learn more by reading, or if you're a visual and oral learner, you read by hearing and by watching, you can choose whichever option works best for you here. Do make sure you watch this because there's a couple of questions on the quiz that will pertain to this. And again, it's just about getting you to really start thinking in this visual language and thinking about what art is. You have your first reflection this week. So these will always be either a journal or a discussion board, or sometimes a blog as well, I believe. Excuse me. So all you're going to be writing about this week, what is art to you? What is your experience with it thus far in your life? Is it something you love? Is it something you're afraid of? Do you hate it? Do you kind of just not get it or understand why people are so into it? Sometimes people feel nervous about art because they feel like they're not good at it. You don't have to be good at art to enjoy it and to be able to think really critically about it. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. Journal entries should be the equivalent of one-page double-spaced 12-point font in a word processing program. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to submit an attachment. What it means is when you open up a Microsoft Word document, or if you use Mac Pages, that you're writing a full page, and then you can just copy and paste it right into the journal entry. So if we open these up, it will have the prompt again. You'll hit Create Journal Entry. You can give it a title, and then you can just copy and paste your entry right here. Now, sometimes I've noticed that students will send me a quick message or leave a comment saying the formatting got all messed up. It's not double spaced in the journal entry. I'm not worried about that. I know that formatting can be a little silly sometimes with the Blackboard text editor. These are really informal. Basically, those instructions are just to make sure that you're writing me enough. I don't want one little paragraph. I want, the equivalent of one full page. So with journal entries, you never need to attach a file. You can just copy and paste or just do your writing right here and hit Post Entry, and we will be good to go. The next item that you're going to see in the learning activities is your first create assignment, and we're going to be creating what I call a mini art cyclopedia. A little play on words there. No, so clever, right? Begin work on this assignment during week 1. However, this is not due until the end of week 2. But what I want you to do is start it this week and do the first half this week and do the second half next week. That way you don't get overwhelmed and come week 2 you're having to do 20 slides instead of just 10 for the week. And students tend to think, oh, this won't take me very long. Sometimes it takes longer than you think. So that's why, again, manage your time well. Do the first half this week and the second half next week. And what you're going to be doing is pairing art terminology and concepts from your looking at art text with images that illustrate their meaning. So I want image examples to be from the 20th or 21st centuries only. So that means you have 1900, the year 1900 as a starting date. Your images cannot be older than that, please. Each image must be properly cited with the artist's name, title of work, date created, medium, and source. And that little writing styles presentation that I mentioned in the Welcome to the Class video that's right there under the learning activities. It goes through that in a little more detail. And you're going to do this as a PowerPoint presentation, or you can do it as a PDF if you want to export it as a PDF, however you want to do it. You're encouraged to use your own creativity to make it your own type of presentation. So again, do the first half, the first 10 slides this week, and do the second half, the next 10 slides during week 2. What you're going to do is give one term definition and one image example for each term below. Each term definition should include one sentence of how your chosen images is an appropriate choice to illustrate this term. So I've given an example below. I've taken this term, decorating the environment, public spaces, and I've used Disney Hall in downtown LA as an example. And I've given a definition that, guess what, I took right out of the Looking at Art text. I'm not expecting you to make these definitions up just right out of your head. You can just take them right from the text if you'd like. If you'd like to take them from somewhere else, that's fine as well. So I've said that public spaces are decorated with architectural projects, outdoor sculptures, signs and billboards, painted exterior walls, and other expressions of urban design. These spaces convey a certain image of the city. So you see, I've defined the term generally. And then I added my own little sentence here about how this specific project, this specific building, is a good example of this term. So I've said Disney Hall, for example, tells the viewer that Los Angeles is on the cutting edge of architectural design, promoting an environment of creativity and progress. So I've stated how Disney Hall is a good example of this term. That's all I'm looking for each of these slides. Don't leave this second part out. Too often students do. They give the definition, but then they don't connect the dots between the definition and the image by giving me this sentence here. So then I've given the image, and then I've cited it. I've given the name of the architect and the name of the building, its location in this circumstance. So sometimes when you're citing an architectural project, it might be slightly different information than if you're citing a painting. The years it was created, it's a stainless steel construction, so that's the medium. And then I've given a link to where I found this image. So that's what we're going to do for each slide. So if I were you, I would just start today and do one or two of them. And by the time you get to this weekend, you'll be done and you won't be overwhelmed and have to do all 10 at once. Just do a couple each night and it won't feel like so much. Students tell me without fail, every time I teach this class, I get one student who says, gosh, I waited till the last minute to start this project. It was so much work. It was so overwhelming because I waited. I wish I would have done what you said and had started this and done a couple images each night. Okay, so I can't reiterate that enough. And last but not least, you have your weekly quiz. Quizzes are open book, open note. Take your time. There's no time limit on them. However, they must be done in one sitting. You have one attempt to take the quiz. They are due, again, no later than Sunday night at midnight. You can do them earlier, and you should be able to see your grade on them right away. I think I have it set up that way. If I don't, then it will just be after the due date, after Sunday night at midnight, that Monday morning, then you can go on and see your quiz scores. And again, take your time on these, go over your notes, go through your book. I'm not doing these to just be cruel. I want you to be able to really take this information and look back over your notes, look back over your lectures, and make sure you are really understanding these concepts. And it helps me to see where you guys are not understanding things if I'm noticing that a lot of students are getting a question wrong. And then in the next week's announcement, I can take a few minutes and go over that item in a little more detail. Okay, so that's what we got going on. All you have due this week is your quiz and your journal. So one-page journal, quick quiz, start your mini art cyclopedia, and get through this lecture material. Please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever. I know there's a lot of material this week, but dig into it, get through it, and I promise you it's going to help you really understand the direction that we go in the rest of the class. Have a wonderful week, everyone.